Hello everyone. Welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, click the like button, and leave a comment if you enjoy bedtime stories that send a chill down your spine. Your support helps us bring you more unsettling tales to keep you company in the dark. Now, let's begin. It was early September of 1997, in a quiet village on the outskirts of Bath, Somerset. The air still carried a faint warmth from summer, though the evenings had started to fall cooler, leaving dew across the grass by morning. I was 12 at the time, and my younger brother, Oliver, had just turned 8. We lived in an old brick house that had been passed down through our mother's side of the family for generations. The kind of place with creaking floorboards, a damp smell in the cellar, and a garden that seemed just a little too big for the house it belonged to. Oliver had always been a bit different. He was quiet at school, happier sketching in his notebook than playing football with the other boys. But at home, over the past month, he'd started having long conversations with someone who wasn't there. When Mum asked, he would simply say, "It's Thomas." Mum brushed it off as an imaginary friend. Perfectly normal for his age, she said. I wasn't so sure. There was something about the way Oliver's eyes shifted to the empty space beside him when he said that name, as if he was actually listening to someone reply. On a cloudy Thursday afternoon, while Mum was still at work and Dad was away on a business trip in Manchester, I found Oliver out in the back garden. He was kneeling in the far corner by the patch of overgrown grass near the stone wall, scraping at the dirt with one of Dad's old gardening trowels. His school jumper was smeared with mud, his hands black with soil. "What are you doing?" I called out, stepping onto the damp lawn. He didn't look up. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Thomas says we have to dig here." A chill moved down my spine, though the breeze was still. "Why?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Oliver paused, as if listening again. Then he said, "He wants me to find something. Something he left behind." The light was fading fast, the clouds thickening overhead. In the dim gray, Oliver's small figure looked strangely out of place against the tangled grass and the dark earth beneath his knees. I thought about telling him to stop, but there was something about his focus, the way he moved the trowel with small urgent strokes, that made me hesitate. It was as if he truly believed he'd uncover something important or dangerous. And then I saw it, just for a moment. Standing behind Oliver, by the stone wall, was the outline of a boy. Pale skin, dark hair, wearing clothes that looked far too old for this time. His face was blurred, like smoke. I blinked, and he was gone. I stood frozen, my shoes sinking slightly into the damp grass. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I almost didn't hear Oliver speak again. "He says it's nearly here," Oliver murmured, still scraping at the earth. "What's nearly here?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly despite my best effort to keep calm. Oliver finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, but there was no fear in them. If anything, he looked excited. "The box. Thomas says it's just under this bit. But we have to be careful, or it might break." The last word sent another shiver up my spine. There was something about the way he said it, like he was repeating someone else's warning. I walked toward him, my trainers making soft squelches in the wet grass. I wanted to grab the trowel from his hands and tell him to stop, but my curiosity was pulling me forward like a rope around my chest. When I knelt beside him, the smell of freshly turned soil rose up, rich, damp, almost metallic. "Thomas isn't real," I said quietly, as if I was trying to convince myself as much as him. Oliver tilted his head in that strange listening way again, then smiled faintly. He says you can see him now. That's good. I froze. What do you mean? He says not everyone can. The wind picked up, rattling the leaves in the apple tree at the far end of the garden. Somewhere beyond the wall, a dog began barking. The sound felt oddly distant, muffled, as though the garden had been sealed off from the rest of the world. Oliver's trowel hit something solid. A dull thunk. He brushed away the soil with his small hands, revealing a patch of rotting wood. "It's here," he said simply. I swallowed, glancing around. The corner of the garden suddenly felt much darker, the shadows from the wall stretching unnaturally long. I could feel a faint vibration in the ground beneath me, like a deep hum, though I couldn't hear anything. "Don't open it," I whispered, but Oliver ignored me. He dug his fingers under the edge of the wood and pried it upward. The soil cracked apart, releasing a smell so sharp and foul that my stomach lurched. It wasn't just the smell of decay. There was something acrid about it, like old smoke or burnt cloth. Beneath the rotting lid was a small, rusted tin box, the kind people used to keep letters or trinkets in decades ago. It was covered in dirt, the metal corroded with green patches, the latch barely holding. Oliver lifted it out with both hands. For a moment, the wind died completely, and the garden was silent. "Thomas says it's his," Oliver whispered, his voice trembling slightly now. "He says it was taken from him a long time ago." I wanted to ask more, but I became suddenly aware of a sound, a soft, steady tapping. It was coming from behind the wall. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps again. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sharper than I intended. No reply. Oliver stood up, clutching the tin box to his chest. "We have to take it inside before it gets dark," he said. It was already darker than it should have been for that time. I checked my watch, for 17 in the afternoon. Yet the sky was heavy and dim, the kind of light you'd expect just before nightfall. We hurried across the lawn and into the kitchen, the back door swinging shut behind us. The smell of the box filled the air immediately, strong enough that I had to breathe through my mouth. On the kitchen table, Oliver set the tin down gently. His fingers lingered on the lid. "Thomas says we have to open it here. He says it's safe in the house for now." I shook my head. "No, we should wait for Mom." Before I could finish, the latch snapped open on its own. The lid creaked upward, revealing a bundle wrapped in faded linen. Oliver reached in and began to unwrap it. Inside was a stack of photographs, yellowed and curling at the edges. The images were black and white, all of them showing the same boy. Pale skin, dark hair, the same blurred look I'd seen in the garden. Sometimes he was standing alone, sometimes with an older man whose face was turned away. In every picture, the boy's eyes seemed to follow the camera. No, not the camera, the person looking at the picture. Beneath the photographs was a small silver locket. The chain was tangled, the metal tarnished, but when Oliver opened it, there was a tiny portrait inside. The boy again, and a woman with sharp, cold features. Oliver stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "This is Thomas's mum. She's still looking for him." The way he said it made the hairs on my arms stand up. That night, after Mum came home and made us dinner, Oliver didn't mention the box at all. He ate quietly, excused himself early, and went upstairs. I wanted to tell Mum everything, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't sure she'd believe me. I stayed awake for hours, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house. At 2:14 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Too heavy to be Oliver's, but too light to be Mum's. I opened my bedroom door a crack. The landing was empty, but at the far end, Oliver's door was wide open. I could see him standing in the middle of his room, holding the locket, his face pale in the moonlight. And there, behind him, was Thomas. This time I could see him clearly. His eyes were dark, deep, and hollow. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, though Oliver nodded as if he understood perfectly. Then Oliver turned toward me, still holding the locket, and said, "He wants to go back to where they put him. We have to help before she finds him." I should have shut my door, pretended I hadn't seen anything, but my feet moved before my thoughts could catch up, carrying me down the hallway toward Oliver's room. The carpet felt strangely cold beneath my toes, almost damp. Inside, the air was heavier, as if the walls had been holding their breath. Oliver didn't look surprised to see me. Thomas didn't either. He stood half in shadow, half in moonlight, his figure faint but unmistakable. Oliver held out the locket. "She's coming," he said quietly. "Thomas says she knows we found it. She's been waiting for someone to open the box." I glanced at Thomas, but he didn't meet my eyes. Instead, his gaze shifted toward the corner of the room, the darkest part where the moonlight didn't reach. I didn't want to look. I felt it, the prickle of awareness that something was there, but I didn't want to see. Oliver stepped closer to me. His voice had dropped to a whisper. "She doesn't like you. She says you weren't supposed to see him." A low creak came from the stairs. One step, then another. Slow, deliberate, the sound of weight pressing down on old wood. Mum was asleep. I could hear her faint snore through the wall earlier. But whoever was on the stairs now, they weren't trying to hide. Thomas moved then, sudden and sharp, his blurred outline shifting between us and the doorway as if shielding us. Oliver clutched my arm. His small fingers were icy. "She's in the hall," he breathed. I forced myself to look toward the landing. It was empty, at first. Then, like a photograph developing in reverse, a figure began to take shape. A woman. Her dress was old-fashioned, high-necked, the fabric dark and heavy, the hem whispering across the carpet as she stepped forward. Her hair was pulled tight against her head, her skin pale as candle wax, and her eyes, they were fixed on the locket in Oliver's hand. I couldn't move. Every instinct told me to run, but my body had locked up. Thomas stepped toward her, his form flickering like a candle flame in a draft. The woman's gaze shifted briefly to him, and something like recognition passed between them, but not kindness. "You kept it from me." Her voice was low, almost a growl, though her lips barely moved. "You buried him where I could not find him." Oliver's grip tightened. "She's not talking to me," he whispered. The woman's head turned slowly toward me. "You will put it back." Before I could speak, Thomas moved again, standing between us and her. His voice, faint and distant, filled the room. "She cannot have it. Not again." The woman's face twisted. Her pale hand reached out, not to touch Thomas, but to reach past him, toward Oliver. In that instant, I yanked my brother backward, pulling him out into the hallway. We stumbled, the carpet catching under my foot, and nearly fell down the stairs. When I glanced back, the doorway to Oliver's room was empty. We ran to my room and slammed the door. My hand shook so badly I could barely turn the lock. Oliver stood there, still holding the locket, his eyes wide but calm. "She won't stop," he said. "Thomas says she's been looking for it for more than 100 years. And now she knows where it is." I wanted to shout at him, tell him to throw it back in the box and bury it again. But the look on his face stopped me. He believed Thomas. And now, after what I'd seen, I wasn't sure I didn't believe him too. We didn't sleep. We sat on the floor, listening. The house creaked and groaned like it always did, but every now and then, I heard something else. A faint rustle outside my door. A long, slow breath against the keyhole. By morning, the air felt lighter, as if the night had released its grip. Mum knocked on my door around 8, asking why we hadn't come down for breakfast. I wanted to tell her everything, but when I looked at Oliver, he shook his head just slightly. Mum didn't notice the locket in his hand. The next few days passed in a strange blur. Oliver still went to school, but every afternoon he would slip into the garden, stand in that same far corner, and just listen. Sometimes I would watch from my bedroom window, and though I couldn't hear what was being said, I could see his lips moving, answering someone who wasn't there. On Saturday, he told me Thomas wanted to show us something else. "Not here," Oliver said. "Where it started." When I asked him where that was, he said, "There's another garden. The one from before. Thomas says it's still there, but it's different now. He says the house is gone." I didn't know whether to humor him or panic, but that night, I found him sitting cross-legged on the floor of his room, the photographs spread out around him. In one of the pictures, behind the boy Thomas, there was a tall wrought-iron gate, the kind you'd see at the entrance to an old manor. Beyond it, I could make out the faint outline of a large house with chimneys, the kind that might have been demolished decades ago. "This is where she lived," Oliver said softly, "and where he stopped living." Something about the way he phrased it made my stomach turn. The next morning, Oliver was already dressed and waiting for me when I woke. He had the tin box tucked under his arm. "Thomas says we have to go today. She's weaker in the daylight, but not gone." We walked. I don't know why I didn't stop him. Maybe I needed to see for myself. He led me through the village, past the old church, and down a narrow lane I'd never been along before. The hedgerows on either side were so overgrown they nearly met overhead, blotting out the sky. After about 20 minutes, we came to a clearing. There, behind a rusted metal fence, was a patch of land choked with weeds and nettles. And beyond that, 2 tall, crumbling gateposts, all that remained of the gate in the photograph. "This is it," Oliver said. The air felt different here, heavier, charged. I stepped closer to the fence, and the hairs on my arms stood up. "Thomas says it's under the old oak tree," Oliver continued. "The one by the well." I looked, and sure enough, at the far side of the clearing stood a massive oak, its branches gnarled and reaching like claws. Beside it was a stone well, its wooden cover broken and sagging. The moment I saw it, a wave of nausea hit me. It wasn't just the sight, it was the smell. That same burnt, acrid scent from when we first opened the box, only stronger now. Oliver started toward the fence, but I grabbed his sleeve. "Wait! What are we even looking for?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see. And then slowly, he lifted a hand and waved, as if someone was standing by the oak, waving back. Oliver's hand stayed raised, frozen in that small gesture of recognition. I wanted to follow his gaze, to see who he was greeting, but something deep in my chest told me not to look too hard. The longer we stood there, the thicker the air seemed to become, as though the clearing itself was holding its breath. "Thomas says we need to go to the well first," Oliver murmured. The fence was old and half-collapsed in places, the rusted metal crumbling to the touch. We found a section where the bars had bent wide enough for us to squeeze through. As soon as my feet touched the ground on the other side, I felt the temperature drop. It was subtle, but enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. The grass was overgrown, reaching almost to our knees, and each step stirred the scent of damp earth and something faintly rotten. We moved slowly, Oliver leading, the tin box still under his arm. His path through the weeds seemed purposeful, like he already knew exactly where to place each foot. The oak loomed larger with every step. Its trunk was split and scarred, the bark twisted into deep furrows. Hanging from one thick branch was a length of frayed rope, swaying slightly despite the stillness of the air. The well beside it was even worse up close. Its stone sides were slick with moss, and the wooden cover was splintered as though something had forced its way out from below. Oliver stopped beside it and knelt. He set the tin box down on the ground and looked at me. "He says it's under here," he said, pointing to a section of earth near the base of the oak. I crouched beside him. "Under what?" "The rest of him," Oliver replied simply. The words made my stomach twist. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell him we were going too far, but before I could speak, a faint sound came from inside the well. It was like water dripping, but slower, heavier. Then, beneath that, something else, a faint rhythmic tapping. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps again. My mind flashed back to that afternoon in the garden when we first found the box. Oliver didn't react to the sound. He was already scraping at the soil with his hands, his small fingers moving quickly, pulling up clumps of grass and weeds. I should have stopped him, but instead, I found myself glancing toward the oak's thick trunk. That was when I saw her. She stood on the far side of the tree, half hidden by its massive girth. The same woman from Oliver's room, her dark dress pooling around her feet, her hair tightly bound, her pale face set in a cold, unblinking stare. But now there was something else. Her mouth was moving, whispering words I couldn't hear, and her eyes were locked not on me, but on Oliver. I stepped forward instinctively, placing myself between them. The woman's lips stopped moving, and she tilted her head slowly, as though studying me. Her eyes were empty, yet I felt the force of her gaze pressing against me like a physical weight. "Don't let her near," Oliver said without looking up. His voice was calm, steady, almost detached. "Thomas says she's not allowed to touch him. If she does, he won't be able to leave." The ground was damp, and soon Oliver's hands were caked in mud. After several minutes, his fingers struck something solid. He brushed away the dirt to reveal a corner of rotting wood. The smell that rose up was immediate and overpowering. The same burnt, acrid stench as before, only stronger, heavier, as if it had been sealed here for decades. Oliver dug around the edges until the shape was clear. It was another box, larger than the tin one, its wood warped and blackened in places. The metal hinges were rusted, the lid swollen shut. He sat back on his heels, breathing hard, then looked toward the oak. "Thomas says it's his. This is where they hid him when she came looking." The woman stepped closer, her dress gliding over the grass without a sound. Her eyes flicked to the box, then back to Oliver. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, her voice low and sharp, like a blade against stone. "You'll let it out." Oliver ignored her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver locket, the one from the tin box. The moment it caught the light, the woman stopped moving. Her expression tightened, not in fear, but in anger. "That is mine," she hissed. Oliver held it up higher. "Thomas says it's the only thing keeping him here," he said softly. "If I give it to you, he'll be lost. Forever." The tapping from the well grew louder, faster, until it no longer sounded like tapping at all, but like something pounding from inside. I felt the ground beneath us vibrate, the oak's branches shivering above though the air was still. Then, without warning, the lid of the box in the ground shifted. Just slightly, but enough that I heard the faint creak of the wood. Oliver looked at me. "We have to open it before she takes it." The woman's voice rose, still quiet, but carrying a weight that made my skin crawl. "You don't understand. What's inside is not what you think. It is not your friend." For the first time, doubt flickered in Oliver's eyes. He glanced toward the empty space beside him, where Thomas should have been, but there was nothing there now. "Oliver," I said, my voice tight. "We need to go. Now." But before he could move, the box's lid shifted again, and a thin, pale hand emerged from the gap. Its skin gray and stretched tight over bone, its fingers long and claw-like. It gripped the edge of the box, pulling upward. The woman stepped back, her face unreadable. Oliver froze, the locket still dangling from his hand. The air felt like it had turned to stone, pressing in on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Another hand appeared, then the top of a head, pale, with dark, wet hair plastered to the skull. And then I heard it. Not a voice, exactly, but a sound that filled my head from the inside. A whisper, endless and insistent, repeating a single word over and over. "Huh." Oliver's fingers tightened on the locket. "Thomas says we have to help him the rest of the way," he said, though his voice was shaking now. The woman laughed softly, a sound without warmth. "Then you will see what you've brought into your world." The thing in the box began to rise. The figure pulled itself free of the box, joints bending in ways they shouldn't. The sound of its movement like wet fabric tearing. Mud clung to its limbs, dripping in slow clumps onto the grass. Its head tilted toward Oliver, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw relief in its eyes, until I realized the eyes were hollow, nothing but dark pits sinking deep into its skull. Oliver took a step forward. The locket swung loosely from his hand. The woman's voice cut the air like frost. "Give it to me." Her face was closer now, pale and still, her eyes bright with something that might have been hunger. The figure turned toward her then. Its body twitched once, twice, then straightened. When it opened its mouth, no sound came out. Only that same pounding in my head, now faster, urgent. "Huh." Oliver looked at me. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear his words over the drumming in my skull. The woman reached out. The figure moved between her and Oliver, its claw-like hands rising. And for a moment they stood facing each other in absolute silence. Then it lunged. The wind hit us like a wave, tearing through the clearing, bending the tall grass flat against the ground. I stumbled backward, shielding my face. When I looked again, the woman was gone. So was the figure. The box lay open and empty. Oliver was on his knees, staring at the locket in his palm. The chain was broken, the clasp snapped clean through. "He says it's done," Oliver whispered. "She won't find him now." We left the clearing without looking back. Neither of us spoke on the walk home. The tin box remained in Oliver's room for weeks, untouched, until one day it vanished. He never said where it went. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear tapping. Not from the well, from the garden at home, in that same far corner where it all began. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps again. And sometimes, I think I see a boy standing there.